Hi, everybody. Welcome to Custody Matters Live. Thank you so much for joining us. And you might notice that tonight I am without my wonderful partner and co-host, Danica Joan. And for those of you who don't know, Danica lives in Florida. And so she is getting ready for a very special guest named Dorian. So she is preparing for Hurricane Dorian, and she's fine. I've been in constant communication with her to see how she's doing. She's doing great, but she is a little bit busy right now. So we're going to miss Danica tonight, but that's why she's not with us tonight. I also wanted to just let everybody know about the title of our show, Custody Matters Live, because we've gotten a few messages from people saying, hey, you're not really live all the time. And that's true, we're not. So Danica has been doing Custody Matters Live for quite a while. And recently she asked me to come on and be her co-host. And at first we were doing it live, but we try to stick to just 30 minutes. And a couple of things that we discovered is it's really, really hard to stick to 30 minutes when you're doing a live and you have people come on asking questions and going back and forth with comments, and you want to try to talk to everybody. And we've got some really, really interesting, amazing guests. And just getting their stories in 30 minutes is difficult. And also we have guests from all over the world, all different time zones. And so sometimes it's hard to get them live in our time slot. So sometimes we're live, sometimes we're not. But for now, the name of the show is going to remain Custody Matters Live. So speaking of one of our very amazing and special guests, we've got a guest tonight who I think he doesn't really need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce him, of course. So our guest tonight on Custody Matters Live is Mark Ludwig. And let me tell you a little bit about Mark. Mark is the Executive Director of Americans for Equal Shared Parenting, which is active in 24 states with legislation. He's personally met with over 400 legislators nationwide and has 30 years of political experience. The mission of Americans for Equal Shared Parenting is to educate and empower leaders across the United States to help pass 50-50 rebuttal presumption at the state level and changes to Title 4D at the federal level. And he's going to tell us what some of those things mean if our viewers are not sure what that's all about. So, Mark, thank you so much for being on Custody Matters Live.
Well, thank you so much for what you do. That's the neat thing. We've got a really good community. I think we're up to over 1 million people. By the time you add all the organizations, pages, everything, I think we're well over 1 million people now. And we just got so many great people in the community. And you obviously are one of the big pieces of the puzzle there, keeping things together. So thanks so much for what you do.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I know that you and I are on the same page about that, about us supporting each other in our missions. And some of our missions are a little bit different, but they intersect, right? Yeah. And so it is very important that we support each other, encourage each other. And the bottom line is that we all want to help children to be able to receive the love and support of both of their parents equally. And so, we need to support each other in that mission. It's very, very important for families and important for the health and wellness of children.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And like I say, there's so many good people. I think the challenge is all of us have been hurt in a relationship. And to get legislation passed, we need a community of people that deals with each other in relationships. And so we need to get over the hurdles that we all come into this with. And I think you're one of the great voices helping people through that. Mine is more of a legislative type of a mission, more than an interpersonal skills. But it's the interpersonal skills that it's going to take to get us to all learn to work together, learn that I think the challenge is most of us come into this, and the average person I see in the community had no background in getting legislation passed whatsoever. They just got thrown into a situation that was just obviously just so unfair, just ripped their heart and soul out, and they're angry and justifiably angry. The challenge is with that anger, you're not going to be able to build relationships to make changes. And so we need people to get past the anger stage to get to more of a logical, okay, how are we going to work together? And to get to understand, and even I, have to remind myself of this on a regular basis. There's not a person in the community that doesn't have some bias that they think is the right way to get things changed. I'm guilty of that just as much as anybody else. And we always have to try and remind ourselves that, wait, we may disagree with somebody, but our ultimate goal is the same thing. Our ultimate goal is the kids. And we don't want the kids to go through this.
That's right. I think, we all have different personalities. And like I said, some of our missions might be slightly different. Like you said, you're working on legislation. I work with support and education for parents and schools. But whatever your exact mission is, if the bottom line of your mission is to help children have relationships with both parents, then we need to support each other in that. And it is highly emotional. How can you not be emotional, about that subject? But when we are meeting with legislators, like you said, or influential people, it's very important that we try to keep our emotions in check and to stick to the topic that we are meeting with them about. And I want to talk a little more about that, but some of our viewers, they just tune in and they're not really familiar with the issues that we talk about. And so if you would share with our viewers, how and when and why did you become passionate about equal shared parenting? What led you to doing the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I had been one of those weirdos that my goal was to aspire to someday either be a president or a governor. I had built an entire foundation for political office. I had run for U.S. Congress against Dick Gephardt, who at the time was the House Majority Leader. Next to Bill Clinton, he was the most powerful Democrat in the country. And I became very well known nationally, and I was being groomed to run for office at a very high level. And then my son's mother got pregnant. We weren't married at the time. And so I backed off the politics at the time. 6 weeks after he was born, she ended up leaving. It took me 204 days to find him and get access to him. And I put my entire political career on hold. My attitude is, I've got a son out there and I want to be a dad before I want to be a politician. So put everything on hold, and not to be over spiritual, but I'm convinced now it was meant to be. I'm 100% convinced I was never meant to be a politician. I was meant to have a learning experience of how to relate to political leaders to use for what we're doing right now with shared parenting. And so I ended up, after a year of a court battle, I got relegated to the typical every other dad or every other weekend dad type scenario, and had a few medical challenges and just really struggled spiritually. God, why is this happening to me? I thought I led a good life and not to toot my own horn, but I think I would have made a great dad. Why is this happening to me? And I'm just totally convinced I had to have a personal testimonial to meet with some of the legislators, many of whom knew me, and were able to see what I struggled through. Because I think the challenge is the average person on the street doesn't realize how much of a problem it is. I didn't until it happened to me. I knew a lot of guys that were every other weekend dads, and I didn't see a problem with it. But all of a sudden, when it's your kid, and you realize, wait a minute, that child is missing out on the bonding experience, on the teaching experience of half of their parents. And so, like I said, I think it was meant to be. And so now my passion, like I said, at this point, I never intend to. The party met with me a couple weeks ago to try and get me to run for the state senate here, and I have no. Till Levi's 18, I won't. This is where I feel like I want to be is educating people so that and that's the other key too, is I know I get a lot of accolades, and I know there's some people that think it goes to my head, and I apologize if anybody out there is one of those. And it's a fair question. But my goal sincerely isn't to be the guy. I'd rather, because no one person's going to be able to make the changes we need. We're going to need about 1,000 people across the country that are educated on how to deal with legislators, how to answer questions, how to build those relationships. And that's my number one priority, is educating the people across the country, because what people see on TV is very different than the way you want to meet with legislators in person. And unfortunately, the issue has been swayed and stereotyped into an angry dad issue. There were people who rightly so were angry in the past and went and protested at a courthouse, not understanding that to a legislator, their attitude is that person's going to someday protest me, I just won't have a relationship with him at all then.
Mm-hmm.
And so they run away from that. And then the other key is it's not just a dad issue. This isn't about father's rights. It's not about mother's rights. It's about the kids. And we need to frame that narrative about the kids every discussion we have.
I can so relate to so many things that you just said. And I was thinking about this earlier today. You said, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person, and, I know I would be a great parent. Why is this happening to me? And many years ago, I was preparing to do an interview, much like what we're doing right now. And I was just thinking like, man, I just can't believe this has happened to me. I just can't believe this, because I was a stay-at-home parent who was super involved in everything, involved at school, very involved at church, volunteered for the city. And, like you said, not to toot my own horn, but like I was really well liked and well respected, in the community. And so I thought, man, if this could happen to me, this could happen to anybody. And that's the day I came up with my little saying that people quote, parental alienation can happen to anyone, so it should matter to everyone. And so I'm just so relating to what you're saying about that. Most people don't realize that this can happen to you. This can happen to anyone. You can be the most wonderful person in the world, a really amazing parent, and you can end up in this situation. And so that's why it is really important that we do all that we can to raise awareness and education. And so you ended up with your political background really working to pass legislation for equal shared parenting. And so can we talk a little more about that? And something that I'm interested in, and probably our viewers are too, is how can we get legislation passed for equal shared parenting when we've got the best interest of the child clause in a lot of the, shared parenting, family codes and things like that? I don't know how we can work with that. So what is your answer to that? Because I know that this is what you do. This is what you're working on.
I think the biggest key is trying to get people to understand that the overwhelming majority of legislators aren't against us. They're just ignorant of the facts. No one's ever taken the time to explain them. And it really hit home because I have several very close personal friends of mine that are members of the Missouri legislature. And they all said the exact same thing. They said, Mark, if we hadn't witnessed what happened to you, mm-hmm. and someone approached us, we would not have even remotely related. We would have thought that's a non-issue. And so the key is, how do we, and unfortunately what most people do, it's almost like chasing pigeons. If you sit there, they'll come to you, but if you chase them, they're going to run away. And what most people do is they have a tendency to want to run after legislators. And if the first meeting doesn't go well, they want to attack them immediately. Instead of moving psychologically to the other side of the table and putting yourself in their shoes and saying, wait a minute, if they've never had a divorce, if they've never experienced it, they don't know. And like I said, I'm just as guilty. Before Levi was born, I thought nothing wrong of a father having every other weekend. It wasn't until I had Levi and it dawned on me that, this kid's missing out on experiences. Now, in the early years, it didn't, obviously it was more of a, missing out on some of the bonding time of learning how to walk and all those kind of things. But as now that he's in school, and I'm still to the point, I only get weekends with him. And I'm fortunate compared to most. I get every weekend, mm-hmm. but I don't get any of that school time. So he misses out on that experience of Dad can help me with my homework. Dad can pack my lunch. Dad gets me ready for school. And I become like a Disneyland dad to him where it's fun to be with Dad. And I like that. But if I'm going to be able to discipline him when he's a teenager and have that bonding relationship to mentor him through life, he needs to see me as more than a weekend dad. He needs to see me doing the routine things that may not be as fun, but they're a part of parenting. And that's what we need to convey to legislators, what kids are missing out on in that experience. And the key is to build the friendships with legislators. What I see, the biggest mistake I see is most people go into a first meeting with a legislator And they just go with this whole list of all these things that need to be changed. And I'm not exaggerating. Most meetings when I meet with a legislator for the first time, I spend 80% of my time talking about the legislator, building a friendship with them. I'm looking around their office to see, do they have kids? I'm looking to see, are they a hunter? Do they golf? And asking questions, because they're bombarded, and it boils down to basically sales, if you will, and not in a gimmicky way. But if I have 10 people approaching me about a topic and there's only time in my schedule to meet with one of those, I'm going to meet with the one who I have the best friendship with. And all of us are the same way. So legislators are the same way. You've got to build the friendship, which gets you the equity to now talk about the problem itself. And that's the number one thing I see people. It's not that you want to ignore the topic, but you got to build that relationship with the legislator first, and then they're going to start seeking you out. It's now to the point where during the legislative session in Missouri, I get 2 or 3 calls a week from legislators. If there's any bill in the Missouri legislature that has anything to do with kids, I normally get phone calls. And not even shared parenting, just because they picture me as a friend that they trust. Right. Because most legislators, they're hit with anywhere from 1,000 to 6,000 issues in a legislative session. So if they don't know anything about chiropractic medicine and there's a chiropractic bill, they're probably going to call a friend of theirs who's a chiropractor to get their opinion. Our goal is we want to be that person to that legislator for any parenting issues whatsoever. So when they think of a parenting issue, they think of you. And so that's go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I've actually had a similar conversation with many parents over the years. Even if you are in a place where you perceive judges, attorneys, elected officials to be the enemy, even if you do feel that way, these are the very people that we have to work with to make progress. So you've got to be amicable and approachable with these people, because if you come across as angry and irrational, they don't want to talk to you. And whether you like it or not, we've got to work with them to make change. I mean, that's just the way it is. And about a year ago, a small group of us here in Texas, we met with the Attorney General at our state capitol in Austin. And, when you get that opportunity to meet with somebody like that, you need to be prepared. You need to stick to the subject if you have been given a specific topic that they're going to discuss with you. And you need to be calm, amicable, approachable, reasonable, and not tell your story and tell about how angry you are and the judge did this and then that happened, my ex said this and then I did that, and then you need to stick to the topic, because a lot of times when you get those meetings, your time is so limited and so precious.
Absolutely.
And the way you present yourself and what you say with that very precious time is very, very important. And I know you do a lot of your Facebook Lives talking about that, talking about how to present yourself and how to come across in an effective way when you get those very important meetings.
Yeah, I think, and you bring up a great point. So many people, when they get an opportunity like that, they don't realize the goal of that meeting is to schedule another meeting. Mm-hmm. It's not to win the war in one battle. And so many people do that. They go in and they just rail on this person they're in a meeting, and hey, you won the battle. You got your meeting with them. The challenge is they're never going to schedule another meeting with you ever again. My goal is always, if they give me an opportunity, hey, I'm not too proud to suck it up. And yes, I know there's times you're frustrated. And I know that legislator may have even voted against a bill that we wanted. And may have even told us they were going to vote and then change their mind. Doesn't matter. You have to suck it up, because by attacking them, you're guaranteeing you're not going to get any support in the future. If you allow them an out, and yes, I know a lot of people are against that, but allow them an out. Hey, thanks so much for giving us a chance to meet with you. Mm-hmm. We appreciate it. We wish you would really listen to what we're saying, because we don't think that you're grasping. Like I said, give them an out. Don't just say, attack them. How dare you do this? How dare you do this? It's, hey, we don't think we've conveyed this message well enough. Will you do us a favor and really try to listen to what we're conveying to you today? And then, as you said, never make it about personal stories. And because a legislator, a attorney general, doesn't have time to work on every individual case. What they want to see is there a pattern going on? So if you do bring up your case, you bullet point. With myself, if I ever brought up my case, normally I tell people, you've got about 30 seconds max to describe your entire case if you're going to do it at all. You may not even do it at all. But for myself, I would just say that, hey, after my son was born, I went 204 days of not seeing him at all. After that, I had a court battle, after which I was relegated to basically an every other weekend dad. And I started realizing I wasn't alone. I started getting calls from friends who told me that the same thing was happening to them. Then I started doing research, and now I've already turned the corner into the statistics of youths in prison, behavioral problems, high school dropout rates. And now I'm turning it from my issue into a macro issue. And now we can talk about problems and solutions. But really only 30 seconds of any talk with a legislator should ever be about your own story.
And always follow up with them, after this meeting that we had with the Attorney General. And, it didn't go the way everybody would have, loved for it to have gone. But
they usually don't, too.
Right. Right. But there were some it was a great opportunity. Great opportunities came from it. And so I know a few of us came home and we sent thank you emails, thank you for the meeting. And I heard you mention this. And so I'd like to talk with you a little more about that. Also pay attention to what these people say when you're meeting with them. For example, someone that worked with the Attorney General said, well, I used to be a family law attorney. I was like, oh, we're jotting that down. So he could actually relate to what we were talking about. Now, that wasn't his role at the time, but I knew that that was something that we could build upon for future talks. So, let them do some talking too, and try to pick up on some things that you can connect with them in your next follow-up meeting. So, oh gosh, what else can we talk about?
That's an excellent point. It really is. You're looking anything you can connect on. I don't care if you disagree with 90% of the stuff. If there's even 10% that they said that you agree to, exactly what you did. Send them a thank you note, reminding them also of what you agreed on, because the goal is to crack the door open. You're not going to bust through the door in one meeting. Just get a crack in the door so you can start gradually widening that door open. But I think you did a great job.
I mean, you have to be realistic. You're not going to have one of these meetings. And again, they allot you a very small amount of time. You're not going to come out and say, I did it. Mission accomplished, everybody. It just doesn't work that way. And so, you have to, every time you get a meeting like that, it's a step forward, and you just keep taking those steps forward and just keep that relationship in build a relationship.
The other key you always have to remember is you don't know where they're going to go in their political career. A lot of times, especially with a low-level legislator, people give them a piece of their mind, not realizing that person could become the chair of the Judicial Committee. They could become the Speaker of the House. They could, a prime example, I met with someone a year ago in Washington, D.C., who was very high level with the Department of HHS. And you have to realize this guy, his livelihood was with a bureaucracy. And after being in that bureau, it's very hard for him to see outside of that. I don't think he intentionally meant to, but I gave him an out instead of just listening to him. And I'll admit some of the stuff he was saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, does he even realize? But you can't do that. You have to listen, let them vent, let them tell you everything of where they're coming from. And then, like you said, find one little thing you can give a hook on. Mm-hmm. And he said a couple things that we hooked on and actually built a very good friendship over this last year. We saw each other several times. I went down to Nashville to the Fatherhood Summit that Department of HHS put on, and he grabbed me in the hallway. We had a couple of conversations. Well, it turns out last week he just got a personal appointment by President Trump to be the head of family policy issues for the White House right now. Wow. What if I had blown him off during that meeting because of the 90% we disagreed with? This is the guy who's the number one guy that if Trump's going to make a change, Trump's going to call him. Not the guy you want to be ticking off. But the key is we didn't know that a year ago. So I always tell people, every legislator, every judge you're meeting with, treat them as if someday they're going to have their finger on the button, whether it goes one direction or the other.
You also never know who someone is connected to. Everyone that I meet, I give them my business card, I tell them what I do, and so many times they're not the person that I was meant to end up working with, but they're connected to someone and they introduce me to someone else. Happens all the time. I just very super randomly met someone online recently, and this lady said, oh, my husband is in charge of 3 large medical facilities in Texas, and he would be willing to partner with you to do some parental alienation awareness and education work in Texas. Wow.
Oh, that's excellent.
It's just, you just never know. So whenever you connect with anybody, you know, tell them what you do. Always have your cards with you. And you just don't know where that connection is going to lead. You know, you got to really.
Well, I thought it was funny. I don't know if you heard the story. Thomas Fiddler and I were at Albany, New York a couple weeks ago. The Father's Rights Movement had a rally out there, and people are always trying to create drama, trying to make it look like I'm going against them. So I wanted to show up in person to let people know, no, I support that organization. So I flew out there, and my plane got canceled or whatever. So I spent an extra night. Thomas and I are walking around the Albany Capitol grounds the one day, and we wanted somebody to take a picture of the two of us in front of the Capitol. So we grab this lady, she takes the picture, and we start talking with her. It turns out she's the chief of staff for one of the state senators in New York. And when we started, she's like, you know, so what do you guys do? And we mentioned, she was like, oh my gosh, my boss would be really interested in this. And I thought, how odd. Here we are just randomly, and this was on a Sunday. This wasn't like a legislative day. This is a Sunday. We're out taking a walk thinking it's just a bunch of tourists out here. And all of a sudden, this girl comes across our path.
Happens all the time. Just, you know, always, like I said, have your cards, be ready to tell people what you do in a way that they can understand. And maybe they were not the person that you were meant to partner with, but they're the connection to somebody else. So I wish we had more time. Like I said, 30 minutes flies by, and we could talk for another 30 minutes. But how can people get involved with Americans for Equal Shared Parenting, and how can people get in touch with you?
We do have the Facebook page is our biggest exposure. I'm so old. I'm computer illiterate. So this year we are going to really start working on our YouTube channel and the Twitter and the Instagram and stuff like that. Right now, the primary channel we have is the Facebook channel. Every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central Time, I do an educational piece, educating people on how to get involved in legislation. Every Tuesday night, we have a guest series, which I need to get you on at some point too, to do a piece for sure. So sometime in the next few weeks, we'll have you on there. But 7 o'clock Central Standard Time every Tuesday, we have a guest series. But Facebook is the best way. And then we have our website is afesp.com, which is the abbreviations. So AFESP for Americans for Equal Shared Parenting.com.
And as you said, this is not about father's rights or mother's rights.
Exactly.
This is about children's natural need and right to have a loving, supportive relationship with both of their parents.
Exactly. And like I say, my primary mission is more the legislative aspect. So I try to sort of stay in my own lane, just because you can't be one person that's an answer on parental alienation and false allegations. So I pretty much stick with trying to get shared parenting legislation passed. But I do try and keep a network of people. And if somebody says, hey, you know, I have parental alienation questions. Oh, well, hey, I know. Okay, are you still on here? I hope I didn't freak out.
There we go.
I think it was a senator. It was coming from Jeff City. So one of the legislators was trying to call me here.
Trying to shut you down.
Yeah, I know. But I do appreciate you so much too for everything that you do. Like I said, we're all a family in this, and each of us needs to play our own role, and you sure play a heck of a big role. So thanks so much for everything that you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all that you do. And like I said, we're on the same page that, you know, one person can't do everything, but everyone can do something, and we need to support each other. And I know I've heard you talk about this before too. Know your gift. Okay. So if your gift is, you know, the legislative end, and you do that, then you're going to help so many people. My gift is education and support in the area of parental alienation. And so like you, I try to stay in my lane, but it's really great that we can support each other, refer people to each other, and our missions do intersect. They are related, at certain points. And so it is important that we support each other. So thank you for all that you do. And again, for our viewers, it's Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. And you can find them on Facebook and coming soon to other social media outlets. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we wrap it up?
No, like I say, just want to thank you so much for everything that you do, and want to thank the viewers too. A lot of times people see people like yourself and me that are a little more visual, and they don't think they're playing a role. But believe it or not, we're all the same team. So if they ever shared a post, if they ever told somebody to watch one of your webcasts, they're just as much a part of this family, and we appreciate those efforts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. And we will talk to you real soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.